Welcome everybody to the fourth annual Writers at Work event, this year on a virtual platform like pretty much everything else, brought to you by Oglethorpe's Division 7 English and Creative Writing and Career Development. Today and next Friday, we will hear from a journalist, an editor, a book publicist, and the director of an independent bookstore about how they got their jobs, what they love about them, and what they really do. Today's panel discussion will be followed by a Q&A session, so put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I want to tell you our scheduled moderator, Danielle Briggs, is unable to join us today, so I will be stepping in for Danielle. And I'm sorry that you will not get to meet Danielle. She's a junior studying public relations and politics, and this summer she's prepping for the publication of her novel, A Darker Hue of You. And on campus, she's part of 10 organizations ranging from cheerleading to robotics. So I want to know how she manages that. Let me introduce our panelists, and then I will ask some questions. And remember, we're being recorded, and this is a university-wide event. So we have people from the English department, we have people from communications, we have students from all over campus interested in writing as a career and in literary citizenship. Sarah Fitz, wave to us, Sarah. Oglethorpe 17 has worked in marketing and publicity departments at W.W. Norton and Macmillan and is now Associate Publicist at Henry Holt Company, an imprint of Macmillan. Sarah has worked with a variety of authors across a literary spectrum with an emphasis on fiction and narrative nonfiction. She has created publicity campaigns for writers such as Susan Choi, Janice Hadlow, Leah Hampton, whose work I taught this past semester, and more. Sarah's writing has been featured on BroadwayWorld.com. Erroll Anderson, Executive Director of Charis Circle, manages the programming, fiscal, and daily operations of Charis Circle and is always interested in the ways that our communities can share skills and resources. A native Atlantan, came to Charis as one of the founding members of the Young Writers Group in 1997 and has enjoyed helping build connections between communities of activists, artists, and academics in Atlanta ever since. When not reading, writing, or running around Charis, you can find ER in the woods with his dogs, Clairee and Jasmine, or trying to unravel the mysteries of his '86 Chevy pickup. And I'm Jessica Handler, and I coordinate the writing minor here at Oglethorpe, and I'm the author of 3 books, and you can find me on the internet, and you can usually find me in Hearst 301 when we're back in the world. So what I want to ask both of you, and I think we'll alternate, I want to start with Sarah. Tell us about your work. What is a regular day like as a book publicist?
So I'm an associate publicist, which means that I have a direct supervisor. I sort of do administrative tasks for her. She is the senior director of publicity. And then I have my own titles as well. So in addition to pulling lists and sort of research for my boss, I'm doing research and interacting with my own authors, creating their tours, choosing which publicity would be best for them. And a lot of times that stuff is dependent on the subject matter of the book and who the author knows and things like that. Mm-hmm. So my regular days are a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, and a lot of just sort of researching where these books will find their best homes and sort of just asking people if they are willing to do something for the book. I mean, I have to write publicity materials and things like that, so I'm pitching all day long.
Yeah, that's tough. And you're responding to what authors dread doing, which is that marketing questionnaire, mm-hmm. right? So, what about you? What is a regular day like at Charis?
Yeah, my regular day is probably actually in some ways just the mirror image of Sarah's, because I'm just on the opposite side of it. So I work with a team of people. So it's a small team, but Charis is a hybrid. So we're a nonprofit for-profit entity. And I run the nonprofit side, which means that I'm focused on events and on community partnerships. Because Charis is a mission-driven feminist bookstore, we are interested in selling books, of course, but our bottom line is not about making money. Our bottom line is about really getting books to the right people at the right time. in their lives, and really supporting the authors of the careers of authors that we believe in. So we're a little bit different than a traditional bookstore. And so I start every morning with a meeting with my team, which is my assistant director, Dartricia Rollins, who does all of our social media and our publicity. So we also make PR kits, and we also do our own. We work with publicists like Sarah, where each author event we create, we do our own pitch. So while Sarah is making her pitches, bookstores also pitch back and say, we're really interested in this author. Here's why we think she's a great fit for our store. And here's what we're going to do to make sure this event is a success. So on the front end, I write all of those pitches to all of the presses. And then on the back end, Dartricia and then Sarah, who co-owns the bookstore, and I meet every day and literally go down a checklist where we're like, how's this one going? Have you made the graphics for this? Have you responded to these people about this date? It's a lot of just answering. I get hundreds of emails every day, which I hate. No one gets into the book business to answer email, but that is a huge part of what we all do. But the fun part is when the events come to fruition and you get to celebrate people's books with them. So at Charis, we do, even during the pandemic, we're doing obviously all virtual events, but we're doing like 20 to sometimes 30 events a month. So we are very, very busy. And it's been great to stay. I don't feel lonely during the pandemic because we are extremely busy. So I feel like I'm socializing with lots of people, even though, I'm only socializing on, we use a platform called Crowdcast, but with similar to Zoom webinar. And so the fun part of my job is, doing the author events at night and really seeing people's books get launched into the world. We specialize in debut authors and in what's called mid-list authors. So people who are not, already famous and already, the 1% of the author world. We really like to focus on people who are on the way up and to really work with an author throughout their career. So occasionally someone will get famous in the course of us working with them, but usually we prefer to work with folks who are new and sort of do the mentorship side as well and say, like, here's what you can expect from a book tour. Here's what you deserve. Here's how you should ask for different kinds of support than you're getting. Because often, the book industry is very big and very busy. And so individual authors are often under-resourced through no fault of the publisher, but because they have so many authors they're trying to take care of. So some of what we do is also just say like, hey, here's, maybe you should ask for this. Or if you don't know, you can also, here's some supplementary things you could be doing to make your book a success.
So this is a support team. Both of you are on either side of the support team. For when an author has a book come out, sometimes beginning authors may feel that, well, I've published a book, ta-da! And there's so much that goes into that behind the scenes to get that book into a reader's hands. And yeah, you're both sides of that spectrum. What drew you to this profession? I want to start with, well, Sarah and I were talking earlier about you being my former student and now a grown person. But I want to go backwards and say, Erroll, what drew you to this profession, and then go to Sarah. What drew you in?
So as you mentioned in my bio, I came to Charis as a 15-year-old. Basically, I was getting in trouble at home, and my mom was like, you like to write, you like books. I need you to not be just running around aimlessly in the streets all the time. So why don't you go be here in this after school thing that will keep you out of trouble? And it ended up being a life-changing. Sometimes your mother is really right. My mother is often right. It pains me to say, but she's been right more often than not. And and so I came to Charis as a teenager and I never left. And what Charis offered me was a place that united my interest in books and my interest in writing. I'm also a fiction writer, an unpublished fiction writer, but a fiction writer, with my interest in social justice and politics. And so it was a place where I could be my whole self. And what I wanted to offer, I also was not afraid of public speaking. I was not afraid of, a lot of authors are introverts and they figure out how to sort of work, they compensate so that they can do the media side of their stuff, but they hate it, and I don't hate it. And I realized that I was good at helping authors who I connected with around the writing piece navigate the politics and the social aspects of the publishing world in a way that was less painful, because it doesn't have to be painful. It can be fun, it can be exciting, but I think so often it feels really overwhelming. And especially for we mostly work with authors from communities that historically have been underrepresented in publishing. So the majority of the authors that come to Charis are Black women. Majority are LGBTQ of the LGBTQ umbrella, and so trying to remind those folks that like they often deserve more than they are given on the first pass, and also the tour should be a celebration. It should be fun. It should be what they want, and it's my job to make it feel safe and fun and exciting and not stressful. So that's I realized that was something I was good at, and it's like hosting a party every night, whether it's on a virtual platform or a physical platform. Our job is to kind of set the stage and then disappear. And so ideally, like you should forget I'm there, and you should really forget that everything is there because you're so enjoying the author's work.
And you do and you do have great events, and I'm always thrilled to be a part of them, either as a presenter or as a participant. Sarah, what about you? What drew you to this field?
Well, I was a psychology major at Oglethorpe, and I happened to have a really great writing professor. Thank you, Professor Handler. I would say that sort of the way that my education worked was I was in psychology classrooms, and that was interesting. And then I was in writing classrooms, and that was fun. And I sort of, once I was a senior, I tried to figure out how to sort of mesh those two things together. So I did a novella for Professor Handler and a writing sort of research project for my psychology classes. And once I got finished with both of those things, I loved them both, but I didn't really see a way to sort of move that forward. So I decided that the thing that I enjoyed was the thing that I wanted to at least try to pursue right after school. So getting an internship at Norton was not really something that I wanted to do. It was for marketing at a high school level for high school textbooks, which is not anything that I ever wanted to do, but it was an excuse. It was an excuse for me to go to New York to try and just see what happened. And I happened to make connections while I was up here. I was nannying, and the nanny family happened to know someone who worked at Holt. There was a maternity leave opening, and I just kind of slid in there. It was a lot of luck and a lot of just sort of hounding people to get where I wanted to go. And in terms of publicity and how I ended up there, I was in marketing, and I was not really interacting with authors. I was doing computer work. I was doing like blogger outreach and things. And that part that I was really missing was actually being able to interact with the authors. And it's fun listening to Erroll talk, because I never really realized how much in common working in publicity had with sort of being a bookstore owner or manager. And sort of that championing of the authors is something that I love to do. And I'm an introvert myself. So if I can be a publicist that an introverted author can come to and feel safe with, that's what I want to do. And I'm trying to give them sort of the experience that I hope that I would have if I had a book out.
Yeah. And I can tell you from this side, having had good publicists and less good publicists, and having been on several book tours, you're right, it is a celebration, and you do want somebody who loves your book as much as you do. So here's a weird question. What's something about your work life that you wish you could change? And I don't mean like, I wish the coffee machine was better. What I mean is something about the way your work is done, the way the industry works. What is something you wish you could change? Sarah, we'll start with Sarah, then go back to Erroll.
I know this from working at Holt. I'm not sure how it is in other imprints, but the sort of the start of when the publicist is involved in the project, I think should start a lot sooner. Right now, I'll be able to read manuscripts and things, but I don't actually meet the author until about 4 or 5 months out. And that is something that I think would be really beneficial if the publicist was able to go to like an acquisition meeting and just tell the marketing department, like, I don't see this in the media. Like, I don't see the actual news hook. I don't know where this person would get coverage. I think that that would make our jobs a lot easier when it came time to promote the book, when it came time to tour people. If they had an idea sort of from the get-go of how they need to frame the book in their minds and how they need to think about coverage, because like in some cases authors don't want to be on TV shows and things, and that's something that we as a publicist needs to know. We need to know what they're comfortable with, what they are willing to do, and if you don't know that more than 4 or 5 months out, it's hard to get the attention of the media. Now it's a little bit easier because sort of everything's online. A lot of print magazines are sort of going digital, but there's still a pretty long lead time that I think that we could combat.
I think you're right. Having been at that acquisitions table and wondering who's my publicist and why aren't they here? For those of you who are attending, and I see we've got quite a few people in the participants room, if there's terminology, questions, anything that's going on that you want to ask, put it in the Q&A, make a note, put it in the Q&A, and we'll go to Q&A, because I know these terms, but you may not. So Erroll, what's something about your work life that you wish was different, were different?
I think the pandemic has really brought out a lot of long-standing issues in the publishing industry, and the publishing industry has really been stuck kind of in the 70s or 80s in terms of it sort of feels like trying to steer a really big ocean liner away from an iceberg.
Or out of the Suez Canal.
Yes, totally. So I am often really frustrated by how siloed the publishing industry is, and particularly how independent bookstores are often treated as like that we are troublesome in some way instead of that we are huge assets, because we are the scrappiest and the most creative part of the industry. We hang on with very little money. We create press kits and do all kind of stuff with no money and very little staff, and we have learned how to innovate with almost nothing. And so there's a disproportionate amount of assets goes to marketing books to Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble even still. And then independent bookstores, which are this huge brain trust, get kind of this weird patronizing energy thrown our way, which is like, we love indies, y'all are the the heart and soul of our industry. But very rarely is it like, hey, it seems like y'all know how to fix stuff on the fly with duct tape and chewing gum. Maybe our industry could learn something from you. And so particularly when the pandemic hit, as an events person, I was like, oh, surely the publishers are going to figure out how to choose one centralized events platform. And then, we'll start doing these kind of joint tours where we'll just like, you'll pick 5 bookstores nationwide. We'll do one event, boom, boom, boom. That didn't happen at first at all. And so I was like, oh, if we're gonna not die, we're gonna have to go all in, spend a ton of money on our own event platform and build this out immediately on our own with no help. Because initially the publishers were just saying, we're just hoping this will be over in 2 weeks. And I was like, 2 weeks? That's not gonna happen. Like, we're gonna have to that's not happening. Like and also because the calendar is, we're usually booking things so far out
Way out, yeah.
that it's like, what were we supposed to do about fall books, and all these things in March of 2020. So I understand why it's much harder to shift gears in a machine that's so big. But because we don't have those constraints, I can make a decision. I can talk to my 3 coworkers and say, I'm going to sign a contract with Crowdcast today, and we're just going to do this. That ended up really benefiting us because we are one of the bookstores that really went all in on virtual events very early, which meant that we got a ton of really great virtual events when everybody else was still floundering. But my frustration was, I really wish that the publishers had paused for a minute to be like, what do y'all actually want to do? How could we work together? And then by the time they decided, oh, we should do one centralized event and invite booksellers, it actually now takes business away from our unique platform that we had built. So now they're doing the thing that I wanted them to do in March of 2020, but now it feels like competition instead of like support. So yeah. I think there's some siloing and not enough communication, and I don't think that's any single person or publishing house's fault. I think it is an industry-wide problem, and it's challenging. And I hope that the pandemic is at least opening up some questions around that and some conversations, and I think it is. Yeah. But it feels slow to change, and I'm not sure how it's going to change.
You were talking about, and Sarah was talking about lead time, and you were talking about planning events. I wonder how many people in this digital room, it's hard to call it a room because really this is my office, but how many people in this digital room who are new authors realize that, it takes a year to 18 months from the time your book is acquired to when it is on the shelf at Charis, and that the planning of your book tour and the interview with you in the New York Times Book Review, that idea starts rolling a year out. So there's a huge amount of, I sort of imagine ants carrying a little piece of bread, like down a, I don't know why I thought of that. But, you were talking about fixing things with duct tape and chewing gum, and I want to get specific here. Is there a specific element or anecdote or idea of working with authors, with readers that you can tell us about that, develops a skill set for you? There was that time when, was there a memorable experience you want to tell us about, either before the pandemic in your job or during the pandemic? We're not quite at after yet, in terms of how you fixed something with duct tape and chewing gum in a way, I'm thinking about being on digital events and having the internet go out, or the fact that, you and I, Erroll, were on an event with an author who I won't name, and they were wonderful, but I think they had a bedspread behind them. So, the things that we have to do, she was great, and she had a very nice bedspread. So I'm curious, give me an example of a skill set that you've developed because of that thing that happened one time. Can you do that? Or did I kind of short sheet you?
I can go real quick.
Okay.
I think the number one skill set that helps me is that I am not an anxious person, and overwhelmingly people in this industry are very anxious. And so so I think what is important about that is honoring that everyone in this industry is a human being, and meeting people's anxiety where they are, instead of trying to act like they shouldn't be anxious or it's not a big deal or whatever, but to really empathize with authors' anxiety and to say, I know that you are worried about this tech, or I know you're worried that people aren't going to show up.
Right.
But I can tell you, because I have done thousands of events now, and I've been in this industry for 25 years, that people will show up, and that the tech might go out, but it will come back, and I know how to fix it. And we'll, that all of your worst case scenarios are fixable. And even some really horrible stuff, like we have authors that get death threats. We have authors that get sexual assault threats, like really ugly, mean, awful stuff happens.
Right.
And we still can sort of accompany them with that and say, you know, I know that like you're being attacked by Twitter trolls, you're being literally getting awful messages in your inbox. Here's one way you can handle that, right? Or here's what we've seen other people do that's worked, and here's how we're going to take care of you when you're in our space. And I think just because there's so many cogs in this machine, often authors get treated just like a commodity instead of like human beings. And so to me, the number one thing you can do when somebody, often people misbehave because they are anxious. And so being like, hey, it seems like you're like when an author or a publicist or a, you know, a marketing person like sends a really rude email to me, like, which happens.
Not from
often,
Sarah though, not from
never
Sarah.
from Sarah. But it happens, you know, and I'm sure they think occasionally that we send rude emails back. You know, the thing to do is like take a breath and be like, hey, seems like what you're anxious about is this. Is that true? Right? Like, is your worst fear this? Let's get to that. Like, let's really like play it out. What's the thing that you're afraid of happening? And then let's talk about what our game plan is for fixing it, instead of like a lot of, also I'll just say, like, a lot of people drawn to publishing on the business side and book selling are type A folks who are like, I can just think my way out of this problem and like create lots of systems ahead of time that are going to like make sure that nothing bad happens. And the reality is that stuff surprises you, bad stuff happens. And so it requires a little bit of like flexibility that like, okay, sometimes bad stuff's going to happen. It's not the end of the world. Like, your event's not going to be ruined. People actually are going to give you a fair amount of grace, and it's all good.
So thank you. So Sarah, who doesn't send rude emails ever, talk to me about the development of a skill set or something that's come up for you in your job that is an example of learning on the fly or making, you know, the duct tape and chewing gum.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of jumping off of what Erroll was talking about, like, I am an anxious person. I am introverted. I don't like to be in front of people, yada, yada. But I don't know, there's something about being a younger person in an office who has some responsibility, whether it's my own responsibility or because I'm doing things for my boss, that when there's a stressful situation, I have gotten very good at just sort of jumping in, not thinking, and trying to fix things. And I think that's something that I wasn't going to be taught in any classroom. I think that that's just something that I got thrown in and I just had to figure out. But knowing that that is sort of something that can be developed is sort of helping me move forward. And I think another thing that I've sort of learned is that when authors come into publishing with no expectations, or sort of maybe they do have expectations, maybe they have a best friend who's on the bestseller list or whatever, and they think that it'll be super easy, and they come in and they say, okay, well, the thing that I really, really want is to be interviewed with Oprah. Okay, well, maybe I can get you Oprah, maybe, it depends, but sort of my job is to, if I can't get Oprah, to get everything else, or at least make it seem like what the author is doing is what they've always dreamed of. I mean, I think my job as a publicist has sort of turned into a like a fairy godmother in a sense. Like I will get you what you want. It may not look like the way you imagined it, but I will get it for you and you will feel taken care of.
I love that. You know, the theme that's coming through here is safety, taken care of, expectations. And we're going to go to a question that I know that we've talked about, all of us have talked about a lot, which has to do with the phrase literary citizenship. But before we get there, I know that everybody in this digital room is thinking to themselves, because I have a magic 8-ball in my brain. They either want to know, how do I know when my writing is ready to submit to a publisher, Sarah, or Erroll, how do I know when I'm ready to do an author reading? So let's start with Sarah and then go to Erroll.
Well, before it comes to us, most likely you will go through a literary agent. So I would say that if you think that it is edited enough, if the story is there, you need to be looking at books that you like, books that are similar to what you are writing. Look in the acknowledgments, look and see who their literary agents are, and sort of go from there, because that is one thing that I think the reason that safety and being taken care of has come up in what we're saying is that a lot of people don't know much about the publishing industry. Like, I don't know. I've never sent things to a literary agent. I've never been in an acquisitions meeting. Like, I know that they exist, but I feel like even inside this world, there's still a lot of things that you're not going to know unless you just go and ask everybody. And it's just constant learning. So I think that sort of knowing that you're ready to do things, if you're willing to put in the work to go and look at acknowledgments and research literary agencies, and the people who would like what you're writing, then I think you're ready. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work, and you've already done so much work in actually writing the thing, but that's the only way to move forward with that.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. What about you, Erroll? How do I know my work is ready for a reading at a bookstore?
Well, one thing I want to share is there's a great book that's just come out called, I think it's, I'll find it and put it in the chat, but it's called Before and After the Book Contract.
Yes.
And I don't know if y'all have read that, but I really recommend it to anybody who is trying to navigate this world. So if you're a recent grad and you're like, I think I'm ready, it takes you from start to finish about.
Is that Megan Down?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's really well done, and it's really like thoughtful about how to navigate all these things. We work, the majority of our work is with author events that come from the big four, so the major publishing houses, but we do some self-published authors, local authors, things like that, people who are published through small presses who don't come to us through this sort of formal author request machine that Sarah and I are part of. There's also, we have a form on our website that's like, pitch us your event, because part of our ethos is also that the feminist bookstore world historically has been a place where people who exist outside of the mainstream publishing industry, we do want to give people the option, if they've really self-published a book that's really special, or it's a poetry chat book that's very small, we want to give the opportunity. There are diamonds in the rough that come through that way, and we want to be able to find those, and we want to be able to support those. So on our form on our website, we ask things like, who is your audience for this book? How are you marketing this book? And how would you get the word out about this event? How it's very similar actually to the author, publicity forums that big publishers use, right? But it's like, often what happens is people make the mistake of thinking that magically, like, they get their book on your website, or we send it out to the new, because I do all this. I send every event out to our 15,000 person newsletter. We put it on our huge Facebook page. We put it on Twitter. We put it on Instagram multiple times. We have a full publicity plan for every event that we do. And sometimes 30 people show up for a New York Times bestselling author. So if you are brand new and have 5 Facebook friends and it's going to be your mama and your cousin, like, we need to know that. It actually doesn't mean that we won't do it, to be totally honest. Like, sometimes I will take a risk on somebody that I think maybe 10 people will show up for, but because I think they are so unique and so special and so interesting. But that is really rare. And you have to know that, because often what happens is people, because we're a feminist bookstore, people will say, well, I'm a woman and my book is about women, and so I think my audience is women.
Not a thorough answer.
Thorough answer.
I would give that a D-.
Right. And so, your book is not universal. Your book is not for all people. Your book is not, like, no book is for all people. So the best thing you can do is be hyper specific. Like, my book is for Mexican American nerds who like this kind of video game and their favorite song is this. Like, really just dig into, like, these are my people. This is the community that I am a part of, and I'm going to market the heck out of it to those people, because I'm on Discord gaming servers, and I'm going to, like, talk to them about that. Like be as authentically yourself as you can, and think about the people who are most like you as your first readers. That doesn't mean that eventually your book can't find other readers. It can. But if your people who are most like you are not interested in this book, nobody else is going to be interested in this book.
Yeah.
And so the number one mistake I see people making when they do event requests with us is just being very generic and very, what feels like laziness to me. Like that it feels like they haven't put in the thought that, like, even a tenth of the thought that I would put into marketing their event. And so, like, if you are not passionate about how you're going to market your book, why should I be passionate about marketing your book?
Yeah. We're getting some questions in the chat, and I want to point out to everybody that Sarah put the link to, it's Courtney Malm, before and after the book deal, and she gave us a link to getting it through bookshop.org, and bookshop.org supports independent small booksellers. So, if you say, they'll deliver to you. So that is a live link there. Second link if you want to support your indies, Sarah says. We've got one question in the chat that I'll get to in a minute. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to go to the questions in the chat. And my students are here, and I'm going to want some Q&A from y'all too. So I'm looking at y'all. The next question I have is, how do you define literary citizenship? This is a term that I think Sarah first heard from me in class, and I know that Erroll and I have used this term in conversation. I think I first heard it from Rob Spillman at Tin House. But I think it's a really important term. So Sarah, what's your idea about what is a literary citizenship? What does it mean?
I think we did talk about this in your class, but I don't remember talking.
What does it mean to you? Does it mean?
I mean, just thinking about the words and what you're saying. I mean, yeah. I think in order to be in this industry, in order to even just enjoy reading, I think you're going to need to sort of expose yourself to as much as possible. And I think in terms of being a literary citizen, that if you are going to want people to care about the things that you care about, you need to find those people, and you need to be well read. You need to sort of know where you fit in this space, because as a publicist, as someone who reads, sort of that identity and that sort of camaraderie is something that I get out of books, and I think that's why people buy them. That's why people want to be in other worlds of the books. And I think just knowing as much as you can about a lot of different things that interest you, I think it'll make what we are doing richer. It'll make your lives richer. And I think that's sort of what I am thinking of when I think
get an
about
A.
Citizen.
You get an A on that. By the
I
way,
haven't been at Oglethorpe for a while, so I'm relearning how to answer questions.
There you go. That's fine. But and also Erroll put a live link to buying the Courtney Malm book directly. Charis, and also Charis does pop-ups on the porch now, don't you? Don't you have porch sales now?
There are two this weekend. So tonight on the square in Decatur, that's one with lots of other people involved. So like food and all kind of stuff. You just wear a mask and you can walk around and visit lots of booths. And then tomorrow from 12 to 4 p.m. front porch, similar, just wear a mask, and we have lots of great books out for you to browse.
Excellent.
Oh, I wish I was back in Atlanta.
I wish you were too. But I don't want to keep you out of New York. So literary citizenship to you.
Yeah, so we just did an event on Tuesday night with Melissa Febos, who's a wonderful memoirist. Her new book is called Girlhood. And it was a great example of what I consider literary citizenship, because her book is a memoir of her own girlhood, but it also incorporates the stories of other women's coming of age and adolescence. And so she invited 8 other women writers across the sort of range of gender spectrum within womanhood and invited them to read from their own work as part of her event. And what I loved about it was every single one of these people got up there and said, my book wouldn't exist without Melissa. My book wouldn't exist because she told me I could write this thing. Her first book made me feel braver. And so I went back to my book and realized I wasn't telling the truth. Or another person said, I called her up, and she met me at the airport, in New York, like as we were both like getting ready to fly out, just to mentor me about this one question. She didn't know me from Adam, but she met me and did this thing. And because of that, I went on to publish my book. So it was like all of these people who had gathered both to share their work. They were all published authors. So they weren't, none of them were brand new, but it was really illustrating this web of like all of these people across genre, across demographics, all sort of had this connective tissue around the fact that Melissa had in some way helped them. And I think to me, that is what literary citizenship is about. It's like the authors who are divas, who are just like, everybody should read my book, but I'm not interested in reading other people's books. Like those people, sometimes they get far, but nobody likes them,
I like the shrug that went with that. Like sometimes they get far.
I mean, some people do. Like being selfish does pay off sometimes, but who wants to live like that? And the authors that I see that are really successful in this industry are generous. They're generous. They know how to protect their time, because you can't, in order to be a writer, you have to say no to stuff. You have to say no to stuff you like, and you have to say no to stuff you want to do. Whether that's coffee with friends or other really great opportunities or teaching gigs, even like you have to say no so that you can actually write, which is really hard, especially if you like people. But you also have to do a little bit of the grunt work of like, yeah, I'll blurb your book. Yeah, I'll read this thing. Yeah, I'll read this draft. I'll do this other stuff because God, I hope somebody will do that for me when it's my turn. Right. So, and unfortunately, we also see that this labor is often very gendered, right? That it is often women who are doing more of this kind of literary citizenship and labor. And so for men who are watching, I would encourage you to be a good citizen in this way and do this kind of unpaid social labor, because it matters. And it's often men who get away with kind of just being a diva and being like, oh, I don't need to do any of that because my writing's so brilliant. Don't be that guy. That's a jerky thing to do. And so it's really important to remember that like it's an ecosystem and we're all connected and rumors travel. And if you're a jerk to somebody, they will remember and they will tell their friends, and you don't want that.
And it'll come back. Well, this goes right to some of our audience questions. Amber Phillips, hi Amber, asks, with the large amount of work in your occupation, how do you find the time and the motivation to work on your personal writing? And I know, Erroll, you're writing, and Sarah, you have been writing. I don't know if you are still writing, but what do you think of that? With the large amount of work in your occupation, how do you find the time and motivation to get back to the desk? Who wants to take that?
I can talk. I would say that after I left school, I have not written nearly as much. I would say also that in terms of literary citizenship, it's something that you should be thinking about when you're at school, because if you don't, you're going to lose the sort of network that you have made while you were there. I sort of thrived off of the rigor and the having editors in school, and I don't have that anymore. And now I think I'm trying to reframe the lack of writing that I'm doing as I'm writing every day for work. I am still thinking about characters that I wrote years ago, and that means something, and that I am sort of incognito doing research. I am learning how this business works. I am learning sort of what next steps could be. And if my draft is collecting dust, it's collecting dust, but I'll go back to it with so much more knowledge.
Yeah, good. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit older than Sarah. I'm 39, and I started the first draft of the novel that I'm working on when I was 29. And what I'll say about this is I, similar to Sarah, for a long time had to and chose to prioritize the writing that I was doing in my work at Charis and in my activism. I was writing a lot of stuff about current events, mostly on Facebook and online. And that felt really pressing and really important. And ultimately, I ended up hiring a writing coach to help me feel like it was okay for me to step back from some of the other kinds of writing I was doing and set boundaries around it so that I could finish my novel. And so basically what I have paid her to do is just be like, hey, how are you going to talk to people about these boundaries? Like, because it's really hard if you like your job.
Yeah.
You know, like I think the people I know who are most successful about carving out writing time often really hate the job that they pay their bills with. So it's very easy to be like, yeah, bartending really sucks. So like, I don't like, no part of their writer's soul is being fed by bartending. So they do it, and then they do it at night, and then they write all day. And, it's a different part of their brain and their psyche. And maybe they meet interesting people, or they drive Uber or they do whatever, but it's not the same part of their brain. And so much of the work that Sarah and I both do is the same part of your brain that you use to write fiction. And so what I ended up doing was saying to my colleagues, like, I am going to burn out and I'm going to quit if I don't finish my book, because it is really important to me, and I'm starting to feel resentful. And so I ended up deciding that I was going to take Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings from like 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I said, I'm just not available during those times. Mm-hmm. I would still work plenty. Like, nobody, like, there's, I'm still working like 45, 50 hours a week, but these are my time where I'm not reachable, but I need y'all's support in fielding emails and fielding calls during that time. And if any huge fire comes up also, I'm not that special. So I can't imagine that like in those 4 hours that something can't wait. Right. And some of it was just changing my mindset around it and being like, this is fine. I'm still getting my work done, but I'm going to dedicate this time 3 times a week. And what has been really special about that for me is I know that my colleagues are fielding my calls and my emails during that time. So I better not be like watching television or walking my dog during that time, because I have asked something of them. Mm-hmm. And so it would be really rude and wrong of me to just be like sitting around doing nothing. So it's actually put a lot of pressure on me to like sit at my desk, do it, be in it. And that's been great for me. So I've gotten more writing done in the last 2 years because of that structure than I did in the previous 8, when I was sort of trying to fit it in weird sporadic ways, waiting for the muse to hit. So structure has really helped me, and accountability has really helped me.
That's good. I like both of those. We have another question from anonymous attendee. Do you have any advice for students looking for internships in the publishing field?
I can speak to that.
Yes, please.
I know for a fact that Macmillan is not going back to the offices until October. So all of our summer internships will be virtual. They did virtual internships the past 2 seasons as well. So last fall and last summer. Our previous intern, she has been with us for all of those seasons, and she has done almost everything completely online. And we have sort of, and I think publishing as a whole has sort of tried to figure out how this whole the platforms and the online things work. So if you're worried about not feeling a part of the community that you go and intern at, I would say that that's probably not going to be the case. We've learned how to pivot. We've learned how to reach out to people. You will still be learning. You just won't be in an office. And I think this is good, because you could intern at somewhere in New York. You could intern somewhere in like Minneapolis or I don't know, San Francisco. It's really opened up the pool. That said, I think what you should do is look at Facebook pages, look at the imprints that you like to read, and just see sort of what their guidelines are, if they have anything regarding info of when they're going back to normal, whatever normal may be. So yeah, just don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah, and you can probably look on a publisher's just webpage, because there's probably a Work for Us or something like that that has a subset that says internships. Yeah. Although at Macmillan, since you're not in the Flatiron building anymore, you can't cut out and go play at ABC Carpet and Home.
That is true.
That is true. What about you, Erroll? What about thoughts about internships?
Yeah, so we do have an internship program. Because of our partnership with Agnes Scott College, the majority of our internships are now going to those students. Occasionally, you hire outside of outside of Agnes Scott. Folks are always welcome to email me. Particularly if and like the thing that is most likely to make me hire someone outside of Agnes Scott is if they pitch me an idea for an internship. So if they're like, I want to do a project with you, here's how I would do it, and it's an idea that kind of only they could do, as opposed to, with Agnes Scott, it's like a very, we have a social media intern, we have we have very sort of specific internships because they're for credit and everything. But someone outside who's like, I really want to learn about the industry in this way, here's what I would love to do with you. Do you have the capacity? That's the kind of thing that occasionally I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's do that. It doesn't always happen because we often don't have the capacity, but that's the best way to get my attention and sometimes make it work.
And also the person who does that should be familiar with the mission statement, right? So that they are making sure that they're supporting what Charis is there for.
Yes, absolutely. So again, similar to pitching us event proposals, you better be sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I will say, even if you're trying to get into a publishing house, you also need to be familiar with the lists. That is something that people will ask you as soon as you start your interview. What do you like about our list? What makes you want to work here? Things like that. So know the authors that you're going to sort of be on the team for.
Know the list. Yeah, and have read their work, some of it. Got two more questions and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay. We've got one that says, thanks to Sarah for recommending the literary agent before submitting to be published. As an aspiring poet, says this person, what other steps should I take before approaching the idea of submitting to be published or submitting to bookstores? Thanks again for the wisdom.
I will say, as a poet, I think it might work a little bit differently. I know for a fact, in terms of Macmillan imprints that do poetry books, FSG does a lot of poetry. I think your first step would sort of be looking at where a home for your work would be. I'm not familiar with poetry, and I know for a fact that Holt doesn't really do it. So it might require a little bit more research on your end. Unfortunately, I don't know if that helps.
I'm putting something, I'm putting what FSG is in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
Poetry books are often published via contests, actually.
Yeah.
So more than it's a little bit of a unique route, but poetry is much more often done through like university imprints or some smaller presses. So my advice would be to put together submit your poems individually to journals that you like. So try and figure out and Poets and Writers magazine is a great resource for poets to kind of look at, all right, where are the contests right now? Where can I be submitting my work? And you can do that. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to have a college degree to finish that. You can start now and, just send in your poems to any place that you think might be interested. So pay attention, are they more experimental? Are they more traditional forms? Do they like prose poems? Do they like flash, very short stuff? Make sure you're adhering to the vibe of the publication. But, start sending your stuff in now as a poet. And then because often poets are less likely to have agents, especially on the front end. And then, you might get a chapbook, and then you might get an offer from a poetry press. They often look at, okay, who won these contests, and they might contact you because it's backwards from how the rest of the industry works. The other thing is what we do. I would also say go to open mics.
Yes.
Go to public poetry events. Charis, when we get back to, we are not doing our open mic virtually because open mics virtually are not very good, I'll just say in general. They're a little tricky to run. But we do have some poetry events. Obviously April is Poetry Month. I would say attend poetry events, and when you're pitching poetry events to bookstores, pitch them in groups. So find other poets that you can read with, because it is very rare for any bookstore to do a single poet event unless that poet is a blockbuster poet. So that person, like Jericho Brown, is one of the only poets that we would do like a single author event for. 9 times out of 10, even established poets, we're going to do a group poet event for.
Right.
So like, think about like, who are your other folks that are your peers? Y'all don't have to be famous, but the less famous you are, the more of you there should be.
Right. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Open mics, excellent idea. And contests. And yes, absolutely. Poets and writers. Very nice. Last question before we wrap it up. And I think this kind of, let me answer live. Done. This one is kind of like the internship question. What advice do you have for finding jobs in the publishing field after you graduate? I might jump in and say, start with an internship.
Yeah, I would say try to start with an internship if you can. If you can't, I would recommend, again, going on online and finding people who you might want to talk to. Ask for informational interviews.
Right.
People like to talk about what they do. They like to sort of give advice and feel like they are helping people. And in our line of work, I would say even just emailing, just send an email, find their email address, ask a question, and try to go from there. Because the connections really do matter. It's such a small industry. And it is slightly difficult to get jobs. So having as many connections as you can will help you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if anybody has any questions, Professor Handler, please give them my info.
Yeah, you're welcome to. Most of you have my email, but I'll put it in the chat. It's jhandler@oglethorpe.edu. And you can email me and I can answer the questions, or I can field them and see if either of these individuals are willing to spend a minute with you. I think they might be. And so that's a good start. So Erroll, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what I agree with what Sarah said. I don't, because I'm not really in publishing.
Right.
I do think it's a different field in terms of getting jobs. In terms of getting jobs at bookstores, yeah, we hire out of usually out of our volunteer pool, and occasionally we also hire out of people who come to our events. So I'm much more likely to hire someone who I think is already very familiar with our mission. So that means that I recognize your name because you've been to our virtual events, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are brand new to me, that makes me feel like you haven't taken the time to get to know our store. And there's so many people who apply for jobs with us who do know our mission and do know the store, and have experience with us, that I'm going to prioritize those folks. It's not personal to you, but it's like we're going to hire out of the people who seem most passionate about this work and who understand that whether it's publishing or the bookstore side of things, this work is a calling. It's not, you're not going to get rich. You're not, it's not a path to necessarily publishing your own book. It's a great career if you love being a champion of other people's work.
Yeah.
If you can be a cheerleader for other people without feeling sad about whether or not your own work is progressing, right? It is. And I would just say again, like, if you're a writer and you want to get writing done, working in the publishing industry or the bookstore industry may not be the spot for you. Because it really does use the same part of your brain. So sometimes sometimes your calling is the thing that you do after your paid job is over or before your paid job starts.
Yeah.
And your paid job is just a job, and it's not your identity and it's not who you are. You're a writer, whether you drive Uber or, whatever, like you nanny or any of the other things that, people do to make money. Like there's no shame in doing other jobs, especially if it means that you get your book done sooner. And there are many days when I've been like, why am I doing this instead of writing?
Why am I doing this? Dennis Lehane, who wrote Mystic River and wrote so many great books. I remember him talking about how when he was working on his first book, he did valet parking, I think, at a restaurant. And Stephen King, we all know who Stephen King is. Before he wrote Carrie, he was working in a hospital laundry, and he would come home and he would work on a card table on the back porch of his house when he wasn't like working in a hospital laundry. So that's a really good example of, I do this job to pay my rent, and then I come home and write. Sarah put a really good link in the chat, which is Publishers Marketplace and Publishers Lunch. Publishers Lunch is free. Publishers Marketplace is not. Publishers Lunch is a newsletter that comes out a couple of times a week, and it gives you kind of information on what jobs are open in the publishing industry, what books have been acquired by editors. And it's just a good way to get a little research and go, oh, these are the kinds of jobs. These are the kinds of things that are happening in that world.
You can also see job changes. So like if somebody gets a promotion, you can also sort of keep tabs of that through Publishers Lunch.
Yeah, through Publishers Lunch. I subscribe to it, so, and I do it, and I've written 3 books, so it's a real thing. Y'all have been, it's 3:05. You have given us an hour of your time on a beautiful afternoon here in Atlanta and a cold afternoon on Long Island. I thank you both so much. And if any of the students, and I think there were some faculty here as well, have any questions, send them my way and I will forward them to these individuals. And if you were in Atlanta, I hope that you make time to pop over to Charis Books and More. You can find them online.
Yeah, please visit us. It's just charisbooksandmore.com. Please watch our virtual events. They're really fun. And they're a great way to build community during this hard time, because it's, you know, it's a way to stay connected.
And buy books. And if you don't buy books, talk about books. What now?
Please buy books.
Please
Also,
buy books.
go follow imprints on social media. Go follow Henry Holt on Instagram.
What's the IG?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, you'll put it in the chat. So that's another thing. When, you know, look at who publishes the book. Here's a book right now, and it's not from either of you, but here's a book. I think I bought it though from Charis. You can find out who the publisher is. Look on the spine. This is New York Review of Books, and find them on social media if you like a publisher. So,
yeah.
All right. I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much. Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye.